Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our guests for Silver Lining for Learning. My name is Lydia Cao. I'm so excited to be here to host episode 199 on alternative education. So today we have our four guests, Sumay, Aila, Allyson, and Justin joining us talking about their story. And so when I first met Sumay at the most recent Vela conference, which is basically a conference gathering educators and entrepreneurs for alternative education around the state and parts of the world. When I heard Sumay's keynote speech, I thought immediately I need to invite her to the Silver Lining for Learning because there's just so much synergy in what we are doing. And I just want to say a quick word about my take on what is alternative education, because it might be a term that's not familiar to our listeners. So I think alternative education is any form of education systems that's beyond kind of traditional brick and mortar schools. That could include things like homeschools, micro schools, learning pods, learning co-ops, online schools. So that's just my personal interpretation, but I will also let our guests who are experts in this field to speak about their conception of alternative education. So without further ado, I will let our guests to introduce themselves. Sumay, would you like to start?
Definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for having us on. I really enjoyed meeting Lydia at the conference and really excited to be here. So essentially, my name is Sumay Liu. I'm the CEO of WeQuil Lab. I'm also co-founder of WeQuil School, which is the online micro school that Aila and I started during the pandemic, which I know that's when you guys started this podcast. And I would say that there are two ways you could think about alternative education, which is one kind of the setting of how the education is being, I guess, received and taught. If you could say that that's in a brick and mortar school, but I think that there's also another way of thinking about it, which is really about the philosophy, because I know that there are plenty of people who could use alternative forms of alternative mediums of education, but are very much using the traditional philosophy of education that we see in public schools. And so I think in some ways you could use both at the same time or either. But oftentimes when we talk about alternative education when it comes to WeQuil app, which is a global school marketplace, we talk a lot about just any kind of alternative form outside the traditional public school system. But when we talk about alternative education at WeQuil School, oftentimes it's very much focused on the philosophical differences in our educational approach. But I'll pass it on to Isla.
All right. Well, my name is Aila Liu, and I'm the CEO of WeQuil School. I would say that alternative education is where you see a problem in the day-to-day, form of education that that's the stereotype, like a bunch of kids facing a teacher and learning through different topics. And then you're taking a problem or something that doesn't really reach your expectations and what you think that school or education should be helping your kid do, and then you are reforming it. So it's like what Sume said with the philosophy. It all starts with the philosophy, and then you can sort of build the more technical things and the specifics based off of that. But it all starts with a problem you see in the philosophy, and then changing that, which can blossom into an entirely new form of education. Allison.
Yeah. So my name is Allison. I am the WeQuil School Activities Director, and I'm a mentor, and I help younger students create projects, for WeQuil. Um, and I have been on both sides, both public and homeschool and online school. So I get the gist. But definitely, I think that whenever you're in school, you don't get to learn like the same that you would learn at homeschooling or alternative online. You don't get them as much support you may need, and I experienced that a lot back in public school. And just like Isla and Sumay said, it's definitely a big change. Yeah.
All right, and I'll round it out here. My name is Justin Shell. I'm the COO of WeQuil app, and I come from an engineering background, but not in the education field. I was actually designing yachts for a decade or so. I got into education when I had kids. I have 4 of them now, and we homeschool them. So that's kind of how I got into the alternative education sphere. And so I'm actually fairly new to the WeQuil app team, though I've been collaborating back and forth with them for years now. And I guess I come at this both from as a member of the team, but also as the father of a child who is in WeQuil school, who Allyson's a mentor to, and is learning the WeQuil philosophy and kind of embodying that and seeing the changes that happens in my eldest daughter, at least as she continues to use this and gets excited about, oh, this is the next project I'm going to be working on. So I kind of come at this from a variety of perspectives.
Thank
Can I
you
go
so
ahead?
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction and talk about your take on alternative education. And so correct me if I'm wrong, so Sumay and Aila, you started WeQuil back during the pandemic when you were, I think, 14 and 11. And then so you were frustrated by how online learning or remote learning is done. So you just took matters in your own hands and decided to do this. So can you tell us the story and how you started this?
I'm actually 15 and Isla's 12 now. But we started this during the pandemic, basically out of just, we were forced to reconsider what education was going to look like for us. And, there was a time where there was a gap between us going to school and when virtual school solution was actually there. So we kind of had some time to think about what is the ideal way to learn. And we kind of just came from this from a perspective of first principles, which I do think that this does have a lot to do with the philosophy of education, because that will hinge a lot on what is the goal of education, and people can differ in terms of their opinions on that. But essentially, I think what we came to and how the model of WeQuil School operates is with the goal of how do we help kids to become responsible and self-directed adults. And so this really comes from a point of view of how do we build the confidence, the curiosity, the competence, and the support for kids so that they can direct their own education, they can direct their own lives. Because once they're at that point, we call it escape velocity, like they're just going to learn on their own. You don't really need to do anything at that point, which is kind of how the whole business model of WeQuil School is structured, which Aila can talk a little bit about. But suffice to say, I think that it's been a long journey. We didn't start off just with all of this in mind, but
I was 8 or 7 and Sume was 10. So we didn't come out of public school then just like normal kids. Well, I mean, we're still we came from the same sort of start. But we didn't just come out of public school and was like, okay, let's do self-directed learning and the secret to education. It really kept building. We were trying out new things and we were saying, oh, well, we can't just watch educational videos. We got to actually see what we're learning, what we're internalizing. And so we were like, oh, why don't we do projects? Oh, but if we're doing projects, maybe we should make it useful to others. Let's present it to our friends. It kept building and building and building on what do we need to prepare us for the real world. But because we were in that, because we started from the ground up, we ended up with a completely different education system that, guess what, was actually tailored to the real world. Yeah, so that
It
was
may help the audience a little bit if we kind of differentiate between WeQuil School and WeQuil app, and kind of take them along the how that developed. So everything kind of started with WeQuil School, and that's what Sumay
yes.
and Aila built early on. So maybe you guys can talk about, you talk about where you started and that it was not like we figured out the secret to education. Here we go, So yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the narrative of how that journey looked, and then maybe how WeQuil School looks now.
Definitely. So this started with WeQuil School, which is a global micro school that employs a project-based self-directed learning philosophy. And so that basically started just with Aila and I using this philosophy ourselves and just trying new things and realizing, hey, when we're learning things that we're actually interested in and we're sharing that with other people, we're learning 10 times faster. Like, who would have known? But then we kind of kept building on that and also inviting our friends to come and learn with us and share that together. And then basically we were using a bunch of different platforms. We had a Wix website, we were operating on Discord, and then we were also using Slack, and a bunch of different platforms to try to make this work. And we realized that, hey, this is a lot harder than it has to be. And we also want to have a platform where we know it's safe for kids. And so because of that, we started working on WeQuil app, and that's what we basically did is combine a lot of the core functionality that many micro schools and online services are using to operate their businesses and their solutions, and put that all into one place. And so these are called rooms on WeQuil app, and anybody can join and create one for free. This can run anything from a club run by a student to a mid-sized business run by an education entrepreneur. So that's so we call the WeQuil app the global school marketplace because there are many different alternative education solutions operating on the platform, and we're really helping to try to empower alternative educators to share their solutions and also find families that uniquely value their solutions. And so WeQuil School is just one of many education solutions running on WeQuil app, but initially we built WeQuil app specifically for WeQuil School and realized that, hey, this is a generalized solution that could be used for any alternative education solution.
Yeah, I mean, many micro schools, pretty much most micro schools, not even just micro schools, but businesses know the pain of having to use all of these different technologies, some of which we don't know are safe, some of which may be safe, I don't know. And then some of them aren't like built really well, and all of those things you've got to coordinate with, and it's a real pain, and we know that because we were in that situation. And so Sumay started building an app with her team to kind of fix that problem for WeQuil School, and we accidentally made an app that now works for all micro schools. And the way that we keep from falling into that pit hole of, with social media, I guess our app technically falls under the category of social media, but with social media, you usually are not super proud of the time that you spend on it when you spend time on it unintentionally. And the way that we keep ourselves from falling into that pit of like just race to the bottom and get them to stay on long on it as we can so we can sell ads is that we don't have ads, and the business structure is actually centered around creating value. So when they win, we win because we get a 5% cut. And so that's what Sumay runs, is the app, but I run the WeQuil School, which is just a micro school on it, albeit a big one.
Punya, you have some questions?
No, I have so many that I don't even know where to start. I mean, first of all, let me just say, my jaw is on the floor if you don't realize it. I'm just so blown away by what you guys have done and the clarity with which you speak about your vision and your ideas. And so I don't even know where to start. So let me start from this, right? So Sumay, how old were you when the pandemic started?
I was 10 years old when
You were
pandemic
10 years
hit, yes.
old, and Aila, you were what, 8, 7?
She was 7.
7. All right. So
Yeah.
you are 10 and 7. There is a global pandemic happening. Everybody's freaking out and losing their brains. And you guys decided to do what? And I'm just curious, like, how did that sort of, I don't even, I mean, I love it. This is so exciting. I wish we could have, like, I think we can have 2 episodes with you guys because there's so many questions. So I just want to understand, like, did you have, like, you are so young, so to go online, there are sort of restrictions and so on. So
Yeah.
were there like adults who were around you supporting some of this? Where did this idea of a business model come from? So there are so many strands. So there's this philosophy of education that you're speaking so eloquently about. There is this idea of that there is an app, there is a school. You're speaking about, Aila, about sort of the race to the bottom that happens in most social media, how many companies haven't been able to figure that out. Multi-billion-dollar companies are still trying to figure that out. So you're
Yeah.
struggling with those challenges. And then there is a pandemic happening and you're thinking of business plans. I mean, how does that happen? And I would love to then, after I hear from the two of you, pass it to Allyson and Justin to sort of how
Definitely.
you got into this. Like, okay, here are these two people building whatever. And then you find out, how do you find out? How do you become a part of it? So I just want to get that sense of that because like my kids are 28 and 25. I don't see them doing what you guys have done. So I'm just curious how that, what was this? There must have been some kind of a support or a structure that allowed you to feel free to do this. I want to understand that. And then maybe go
Yeah.
to Allyson and Justin to get their takes, because I think you guys came in a little later once some things had been
Yeah.
done. So I'd love
Yeah.
to get that part of the story. So go ahead, take it away.
Well, I mean, we really started from a place of like necessity. Like Sumay said in her keynote speech, I remember this: necessity is truly the mother of innovation, or something like that. I helped her practice for her speech, and by that I mean I listened. And so, and that was really where it came from. I mean, a lot of families were looking for alternative sources for education when the pandemic hit. We all know that for a majority of a great majority of kids, the online public school was far from great, and we needed to learn, and we had freedom to do it. Our family has always been a bit of an odd and entrepreneurial and innovative one. And so we had that mindset. Oh, I need to charge my computer. We had that mindset of, innovate, solve problems, find opportunities. And since we needed that solution, well, like I said, it didn't just pop out of nowhere. We kept building on it.
I can try to articulate some of the iterative process that came into this. So
Yeah.
initially, the first night, our parents actually pulled us out of school the night before schools closed down because the stock market basically tanked like 10% in a day, and they're like, okay, we kind of know what's going to happen from here. And that night, our dad came up to our room and he said, talk about what you want to learn and stay up late. And we were basically just thinking like, okay, if we have all this freedom, we're not going to school tomorrow, what are we going to do? And we essentially came to the conclusion that we're going to learn about all the different things we can learn about because we didn't really know. And that involved watching some crash course videos and Khan Academy courses. And so that first day, Aila and I, we were all like snuggled up with our blankies and we were watching all these educational videos, and then our parents came down. Yes. Yeah, and our parents came down and asked us, okay, what have you guys learned? And we were like, oh, well, we watched this science video and we were trying to remember what we had learned, but it didn't really stick because we weren't an active participant in that learning process. And that's when we had a conversation about, okay, how can you actually internalize the knowledge, but then also demonstrate it? And that's when this concept of the project really came to be, is how do you actually take this knowledge, apply it in some way, and be able to to show somebody I know this subject really well. I have this competence. And so what a project is, how we define a project is something that is novel and useful. And I love to pass this on to Allyson because she's been working with students to create projects. And but maybe you could just talk a little bit about what a project is, maybe some examples so people can try to understand that and how that has impacted your own learning and understanding of education.
Okay, yeah. So a project basically is kind of like an article, like a normal article on Google, but students as young as like 7, 8 can go on WeQuil app and they can create projects of any of their interests: history, science, coding, mathematics, chess, anything they like. They can make a project about. Basically, one time I made a project about like Einstein, because I love history. And it because after I learned about Einstein in school, I was like, okay, now can I learn more about this? And I wanted to stay up like all night researching about Einstein. And it was a lot. But basically, a project is where students can take what they learn to like the next level and then they can pursue it, their dream, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's also how we define a project is anything that is novel and useful. And the distinction between what you'll get from regular classwork is the novel aspect, because anybody can write a Wikipedia paper about Einstein, but that's not what Allyson does. You can definitely check out all her projects. They're incredibly interesting because she's talking about her perspective, how that has impacted her life, drawing in pretty much all of these projects are I guess they're not just for confined to one subject, because they're really thinking about how has this impacted me? How can I make this novel? How can I make this not something ChatGPT can write in 30 seconds, right? And so that's something.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the novel aspect comes really naturally, because if something isn't novel, it's not very interesting. If Allyson was just writing basic facts with nothing else, I doubt she would have been that excited, right? Because if it's novel, then that means that it has something that is unique to that project. It sets it apart. And so maybe instead of a book summary, you could say takeaways from that book, or takeaways. That's something you can't get from anywhere else, is that person's specific takeaways. And that's why these kids are super interested, is because it's novel and most likely relevant to their lives. So it's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, go ahead.
so quick comment here. So when you talk about novel and effective, if you go look up the research on creativity, one of
Yep.
the core definitions of a creative output is something that's
novel and
novel and
useful.
effective, you know.
Yes.
And so I think that's another thing that you're tapping into, if I can speak to that, which is that it is a creative thing. So you are engaged in building something which, in whatever small or big way, didn't exist before, and there's a great
Yeah.
value to that. But I want to come back to Allyson and then Justin. Allyson, how did you find out about this? Did you know these guys before, or you just ran across it online and you decided this is what I'm going to do? And then Justin, how did you find out and become a part of this? So Allyson, I'll start with you.
Okay, so I have a close friend, and their mom is a part of WeQuil, and I was actually looking for a debate club, and I've always wanted to be on a debate team, and they were like, "Hey, join this app, and we have a debate club. Your daughter would love it," and so I got it, and then these random strangers wanted to talk to me and meet me, and they wanted to talk about what I liked, like history and science, and I was like so not weirded out, but I was so nervous. And then I finally joined the meeting and I was like, whoa, these people are so awesome and cool. And like, they've always helped me with like learning things that I never thought I could learn, like math, for example. I didn't think I could be good at that. Now I'm learning all kinds of math. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So Justin, and how does it feel to work as a developer, or whatever work we do with WeQuil, with these kids who are, I mean, that just blows me away. Just the idea of that. That's awesome.
Well, obviously you've met them. I mean, we act very much like contemporaries. We're not not at different levels. Their learning rate has been so quick that by the time they are my age, they'll be geniuses. And that's not the same trajectory that I was on, probably at their age. But I came about this, yeah. So I started out in engineering, and in trying to figure out what we're going to do for our kids, realize that like we want to do something different. I didn't think that the schooling that I got, I mean, it was fairly effective. I went to, quote unquote good schools, and I learned a good amount, but I was very bored for a lot of the time. So one of those things I got really good at was doodling. So at least there was that skill that I was constantly practicing. But I was like, there's got to be more. And so, I started looking around the alternative education sphere, and just trying to figure out like what resources are physically around us, that we could use to supplement the things that like I'm not good at, my wife's not good at. So how can we do this homeschooling thing? And I basically built a map, like a Google My Map, basically, of all the resources around us. And everybody was like, "Oh, that's super useful." Shared it out on some Facebook groups, and they were like, "Hey, can you add this and this?" I was like, "Well, that seems like an app that should already exist." But I never built software, so I taught myself how to, program using YouTube and some MOOCs. So people that poo-poo MOOCs, like it's like I can do full stack programming now. I don't think I ever officially finished a course. I have no certificates, but I know a lot more. And I went through a lot of MOOCs, and they were incredibly useful. So I built a fully functional app around it. And the whole time I was building that, I kind of came across the WeQuil team, and we just kind of been, going back and forth on education, and just have long discussions on, educational philosophy and business, and how to make our both of our apps work out. And when WeQuil kind of shifted over to building out WeQuil app, they're like, you're doing a lot of the same things. You're trying to build this network of, in the alternative education sphere. We have a lot of alignment in our views. And eventually they were like, you want to just join the team? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. And now we're here. So.
Wonderful. I could keep asking questions, but I know Kurt's jumping at the bit as well, and I'm sure Lydia has some questions too. So I'm going to pass the baton there. I'm just going to drop a quick link, quick mention that back in 2021, we had Peter Gray and Bria Bloom for an episode on self-directed learning. And I'm sure you've seen Peter Gray's work. Peter Gray is just an amazing, thinker and around sort of self-directed learning, the value of play and learning. And if you haven't, then you should check him out. He's pretty cool. Kurt, on to you.
Well, Justin, can you hear me? I have 3 books on MOOCs and open education. And I've probably done dozens of studies. And I taught a MOOC on how to teach online for the first MOOC for Blackboard, actually, and the first MOOC maybe for Indiana University back in 2012. Had 4,000 people or so. So yeah, I've been dabbling in this as well. And with my kind of signature book, The World is Open, How Web Technologies Revolutionized Education in 2009. I plan to write The World is Wide Open book someday, and now I know 3 people, 4 or 5 people I'm going to interview for that book. I don't know when I'm going to get to. I keep trying. When Punya mentioned, and by the way, just Lydia started us off here, Lydia Kaus from University of Toronto. She's our newest co-host in the show and putting these shows on alternative education together for our listening audience, or those people running the trails. We will have more such shows if this one's exciting for you. And we have Punya Mishra from ASU, myself, Kurt Bonk from Indiana University. 2 missing co-hosts are Chris Dede at Harvard, who's in a plane somewhere because of all the CrowdStrike problems from yesterday, causing chaos and to the travel schedules of people, and making a lot of people frustrated in the corporate world. And we're missing Young Zhao, who's presenting right now at a conference. But the 5 of us will continue forward to next week, which will be episode 200. This is almost like the prequel to the anniversary special that we're having, and also 201 the week after. We're going to have some young people, not this young, but young people who are movers and shakers already And so we have next week on, and we'll talk about that at the end, a couple well-known statesmen in the field of education for a long, long, long time. So first of all, Lydia and Sumay and Allyson, there is a kind of a list called 40 under 40. And there's a list for 30 under 30, 30, entrepreneurs and creativity people who are under age 30. But you guys are going to make the list of 20 under 20 you can try for the next 4 or 5 years. I almost thought, that you could make the list for 10 under 10, but anyway, so that was just a comment, and I was going to ask where you get the courage to do all this, but it sounds like your parents gave you the courage to get this started. And I had a software company. I had a company kind of like SurveyMonkey called SurveyShare, and so I know and Punya's dabbled in a lot of entrepreneurship and interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs. And so when we hear people like you creating such a explosively empowering project like this, it takes us aback a minute because we haven't quite experienced this before. We're usually interviewing people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, about their creations. So one was courage, but I was also going to ask about open education. And that, do you rely upon free and open educational resources to supplement learning, and who curates that, and how are those made available? And, you're in 50 states apparently, and 50 countries, I mean, just a few years. How does that come about so quickly? And are they utilizing these free and open access resources as well? I mean, how do you ramp up curriculum for everyone in such quick order and have someone who's kind of being a quality assessor for that curriculum? Is there any accreditation process that you have to go through with this, with homeschooling you don't have? I mean, what are the barriers? What are the barriers, and what are the existing resources that are the affordances that others can tap into and learn from your experience and your model? I mean, I've talked a lot of different things there, and I've got a ton more. So
Yeah.
maybe I stop there a second, let you breathe, maybe let
Sure.
me breathe, and any comments you have on any of that.
Yeah, well, I think as I already mentioned, a lot of what we focus on is helping young people get to a point of responsibility and curiosity. And once they are at that point, there's so much content out there. Like we're not really worried about the shortage of content. Like that's the last thing we're worried about. And it really is about how can we help young people then take that and create value in a way that demonstrates their competency, because there is a problem of communication when you're doing something different. And that's the same is true for homeschoolers, especially when applying to colleges. You need to communicate, what did I do for my education? And so what we help young people do is take what they're learning to create value in some way, whether that's through an article or creating a video or starting a business, teaching a class, whatever it may be, and then doing live demonstrations every week where they present what they've done, they answer questions, other people give them feedback. That's a way where they can truly, like, we've had kids come and maybe they didn't really understand the content of their article because they were just, kind of copy pasting from other sites they found or using ChatGPT, and it was obvious they did not know what they were talking about.
It was also
right?
extremely boring, because when you have it's not novel and useful, then it's extremely boring.
Yes. And so because of that, their competence is self-evident through those demonstrations, and part of what the app helps to do is document that. And so we have something called the digital resume on the platform, which is a part of every user's profile, where you can curate all the projects and demonstrations that you've done to show, like, hey, I am really good at teaching because I've taught these classes. Here are reviews from my students. All of those things are real world demonstrations that are just self-evident. If you can see.
Yeah, it's the difference between saying I got an A in this coding class and here's an app that I built, right? If you want to test Sumay's knowledge of coding, you can go on WeQuil app and see, oh, here's this app that she built. It's self-evident. It's the same way that you guys show your competency in something. The goal is to help people, and if your product doesn't work and if your service doesn't work, then well, there you go. It's what's really important is that kids find that motivation to learn, and the way they do that is they see the relevance of the information and the things that they're learning in their lives. So we're
Yeah.
we're basically creating a space that is like the real world, where they're trying to help people without, some of the dangerous consequences that can come with that. And then they're learning and creating. Like, you don't need to worry about Allison and having to shove facts down her throat, because she's really, really interested in learning, and she has that motivation to learn. So once she has the motivation, then she can go out there and have the confidence to create and explore. But if the information is not relevant to their lives, then what's the point of learning it? Because they won't remember it.
Yeah, I think that's also the
philosophy.
Yeah, that's also the reason why we don't have a set curriculum and we don't have grades. And so the reason why we don't have grades is because, well, Naval Ravikant talks about how the two most effective and robust ways in which you can test truth are, there are two systems. One is nature. Physics isn't going to lie to you. And the second is free markets. If people don't like your product, they won't buy it. You can't really hide from that. And so we're really trying to use these systems of testing truth to help young people learn, how can I test my own competencies? How can I know if I actually know this, right? How can I know if I'm adding value to people? You have to go out there and see it for yourself. And so really empowering young people to go through that process, and there's a ton of learning involved. And then the reason why we don't have curriculum is because, well, you see all these studies of, basically there was a study of the top, like there was 30 high schools, and students took their exams 3 months later, and the average grade dropped from like a B minus to an F. They're not remembering any of this because they're not applying it. They don't know why they're learning. They don't know how this knowledge is actually going to help them. And so what we help young people to do is start from a place of, what are your goals? What are you interested in? So they're automatically going to be engaged. If you start from that point, then they're going to be interested. And then there is some concern over, how do you expose young people to a diverse set of ideas, and you don't want them to just only think about their single interest. And that's why we have community involved, in which young people present projects to each other every week on demo day. And maybe you're not super interested in science, but you're being exposed to those ideas from a student who is interested in science. So you're much more likely to become interested in that subject if it's coming from somebody who's already very passionate and interested and did that work. So that's kind of how we bypass a lot of these contrived systems to see, oh, is this young person learning enough, and how can we make sure that they're going to be ready? The thing is that I think that's why it really does come down to, what is the goal? And for us, the goal is, how do we, as quickly as possible, get these young people to a point where you don't have to worry, because they're curious, they're motivated, they're self-directed, they know how to ask questions and ask for feedback, and they're in a community of supportive adults, mentors, and peers that can help them to explore a diverse set of ideas.
Allison or Justin?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and a lot of those answers, I think, centered around the WeQuil school and the WeQuil school philosophy. So to expand that kind of to WeQuil app, when other organizations are coming onto the platform to utilize those same tool sets that Sumay and Aila were talking about, they originally built for WeQuil school, but then allow that to scale out to the WeQuil app, so that others could utilize those same tools on the platform for free. So in those instances, when someone comes on and creates their own room, it's a private room that they're utilizing the tools to run their own program. So some of those are, existing programs. Some of them are in person, some of them are virtual, some of them do both. So for example, we'll talk about maybe Extend, which is a program not too far away from me in Maryland, where I'm located. They're a homeschooling tutorial, and so they had an in-person presence, and they were using GroupMe for their chat, and they were using Google Drive for storing information, and they were sending out emails, and they had all these different tools that they were using, and Sumay talked about how this was really difficult for any educator to manage. But from a parent's perspective, it's also a nightmare, because I'm looking for information from 5 or 7 different places, and that's one of the problems that WeQuil app solves, is like bring that all into one place. So when all those things are brought into one place, Extend can either continue to operate and use it as like a communications and operations platform for their private community, or they can branch off into the virtual space as well, maybe providing some of the solutions to their community that way and some of them in person, but their community stays private until then they have to go through kind of an internal process before they get opened up publicly to the rest of WeQuil app. So there are some processes we have in place and plan to extend those over time to ensure a level of quality on the more public global school marketplace that we're building. But a lot of organizations, a lot of the rooms on the WeQuil app now are completely private, and those organizations are just using the platform to manage their existing school or micro school, homeschool co-op, or whatever it might be. So,
Allyson?
Yeah, no, so since I'm the mentor, one of them at least, I help students make projects. A lot of times I will have students go on these meetings and they'll make projects, but they only have ideas to make them about one interest and one thing only. Like, let's take Minecraft, for example, a video game. They only think they can only do that. And so because they know they're good at doing that, they don't expand their knowledge to do so, like, and make them about other video games. And so they don't try as hard. But I've learned that if I ask students, like, hey, how can you change your subject but still make it fun and interesting? They're like, okay, well, I do like to do this sometimes, and I take it from there, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, I think one of the ones, I mean, I'll just chime in here because it's one of the examples that, my daughter did. And if you want to talk about the differences along the spectrum of what those projects might look like, last week she did a project on her favorite stuffed animal, that she had created this whole story, this whole background story for her, and kind of gave a narrative, like, who she was and why she loved this stuffed animal. So, kind of a personal reflection type of project. Whereas 2 weeks ago, she, tripped on the playground and smacked her head into a pole and had to go get a CT scan. And she was like, well, this is interesting. What does this giant machine do? And so she did an entire project on what is a CT scan? How does it work? Had all these metaphors that she had figured out. And then we went for this follow-up, and the doctor was like, can you tell me what happened? And she's like, so approximately 10 a.m. on June 29th, I hit my head here, and and then she's like, and then we went in the CT scan. It's like this big donut machine, and it takes a bunch of pictures from a bunch of different angles, and just like a loaf of bread, it takes slices of pictures, and then you go see the whole picture once it comes back together. And like the doctor's like, listening to this 7-year-old describe, exactly how a CT scan works and what happened to her. But I think that like just illustrates nicely the range of projects and the reason. I mean, they're going to get a lot of things that they're interested in through their daily lives. Something that somebody mentions, something that happens to them, and the project's a good reflection time to delve deeper into those questions that they have, and to have that reflection time, that consolidation time. So it's doing a lot with a fairly simple structure, and then the facilitators like Allyson are really good at kind of like teasing out questions and getting them curious about kind of new things to delve into. So
a big part of the instructors and the learning coaches and the mentors, a big part of their job is to broaden those horizons and really expose them to a lot of experiences and ideas. Because if there are all these things that are relevant to them that they don't know about, they're going to become really curious. And it depends on the kid. Some of them are a lot less curious for certain reasons, but we all have that in ourselves, and our job is just to coax it out, is to broaden those horizons and show them the world, and then it'll just kind of click and they'll light up. And then once they light up, they are so motivated and it's so cool. Like that's like one of my favorite things is the world and is seeing a kid light up with a project idea and just go because they're so motivated.
So if this WeQuil initiative or project is gets boring for you guys, I got a suggestion. Sumay, you started off talking about SDL, self-directed learning, and how to foster that curiosity, and Aila's expanded on that herself quite a bit here today, to help people not give up, right, and all this. But, there are over 7 billion people on the planet. There are billions of people who are going to be forced to be self-directed learners in the coming century, in coming decades. And we need to know more about how to foster, a self-directed workforce, the lifelong learning, and all that. If you can write the book, you'll get millions of teachers reading that book, and other educators and other interested people. I've been researching self-directed learning for a couple of decades, in particular the last decade, and have a checklist for self-directed learning and some guidelines. And so I will send that to you after the show, and then you go ahead and write your book based on, and you'll help the whole world out. I also have a book on motivating learners online that's free, called Tech Variety, or Adding Tech Variety, with 100 activities, and has a new book, Motivating Supporting Learners Online, a variation of that first book, Tech Variety, that's free. And it's available, and the first one's available in Chinese and English. And I'll send you the link to as well. Some of your teachers might find that valuable, all the resources. And so we talk about tone, effective climate, right? Encouragement, curiosity, variety, autonomy, relevance, interactivity, engagement, tension, and yielding products. Those are the 10 principles of the Tech Variety model, spells Tech Variety. Anyhow, I've been dabbling in this for decades myself. I find what you've been talking about exactly in line with the Tech Variety model. I have a second model, read, reflect, display, and do, R2D2. It's my Star Wars model. Unfortunately, that book is not free, but I'll send you something on that as well. But I really encourage you to just keep collecting anything you're learning about self-directedness, how to foster it. And even if you can just create some guidelines and put it on the WeQuil website, or, about what's been successful in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Isla's been putting together a ton of resources. I know Allyson has as well, writing projects on this philosophy. We're also working with Jimmy Edwards, the Chief of Educational Success for WeQuil app. He's getting his doctorate in curriculum and instruction, and he's been a big help in helping us to try to communicate all of our ideas and approaches in a way that other people can try to replicate, because we did come to this philosophy from a very different, we don't have an education background. We never thought about homeschooling or education before the pandemic. And a lot of these ideas really came from the startup world, because, a lot of the people that we learned from are leaders like Paul Graham, Naval Ravikant, really talking about value creation in the digital age, where all of these, the tasks that were necessary, what the public education system was made for, all of those things are now increasingly becoming automated, either through software or robotics. And so because of that, the whole nature of success and what humans need to do is changing radically. And so we kind of came to that from that perspective, but also it can be hard to bridge that gap in terms of communication to just parents and teachers who are, thinking, oh, well, I have these kids and what am I supposed to do? And it can be scary and overwhelming sometimes. So definitely there's lots to explore there.
So
Yeah.
we are running a little bit low on time. I'll make sure Lydia and Punya gets asked a question, but let's just plug this. Go to the blog. Our listeners should go to this blog post. And I'm going to encourage Sumay, Aila, and Allyson to send more, and Justin, send some links. We can put more links in this blog post so people can learn. We
Definitely.
all want to learn more about this. Okay, so thank you all. Lydia.
Actually, Punya, do you want to go first? I have plenty of time chatting with these folks.
Okay, sure. This is going to be brief, quick. How many people are participating in the platform so far? Do we have a sense of the number?
Yeah, well, we have over 2,000 users. I have not checked the latest numbers on that, but
Okay,
yeah.
and what's your sort of business model per se?
Yeah.
Somebody said like you get 5%. 5% from whom and what?
Yeah, so the platform is completely free for anybody to use. Essentially, anybody can run payments through their room, whether it's a homeschooling parent who's providing co-op services to a micro school, serving hundreds of students. Yeah, they can provide payments and we take a 5% commission. And that's really to align ourselves with our users. As Aila was saying, a lot of these social media platforms, we see a lot of bad things coming from that because their goal is not to help you, it's to keep you on the platform.
Those are
And
just
so
how the incentives are set up.
yeah, so we're trying to incentivize us to help every one of our users succeed in that way.
Sounds good.
And then
So-
WeQuil School itself
Sorry.
just gonna also has a kind of an onboarding program. So a lot of people coming from, that are not coming from a self-directed background, this is a bit of a foreign philosophy. So and there's a lot of things that they have to learn that are necessary for them to start. So for example, my daughter is only 7 years old. Her ability to use the computer is quite limited still. So it's a very high touch 4-week onboarding process that the kids go through if they're going to become a WeQuil school member, and where they're meeting with their learning coach every day, and they'll help them figure out, okay, this is how you get an idea about the projects, this is what you could do, and then every day getting a little more progress, a little practice presenting, and then there at the end of the week for the presentations. So there's a cost for the onboarding process to get them up to speed. And then it's like, all right, well, now if you don't need us anymore, then just run free and continue to be a self-directed learner. It's not costing us anything to teach you. So go ahead and use the platform to learn. So there's that also built into the WeQuil School.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
one of the
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Aila.
It's a bit tricky in terms of like measuring so-called students, because there's like Allyson,
Yeah, exactly.
who's technically a student but also a mentor, and she's also like running clubs on the app. So it's like, okay, where does she fit in? But we have served over 500 students since the pandemic in Allyson school.
Perfect. Yep. No, that's, and in fact, I'm so glad, Aila, you mentioned that, because the comment I was going to make was that one of the things that I think you guys haven't mentioned, but it has been sort of implicit, is sort of Allyson's role, which is that of starting as a participant, wanting to do debate or whatever it may be, but also growing into that role and becoming a mentor. And as I see it, and Aila, you actually phrased it perfectly right, which is that she is both a learner and a practitioner within that space. So you are now learning skills. So it's of being a better mentor. I mean, what you talked about, for instance, that, when somebody comes with a project, I'm sure that didn't come right off the bat to you the first time you were doing a mentorship role. You had to sort of sit back and reflect and say, why is that narrow? What's missing? And so you are learning in the act of doing. So I think, yes, those roles ideally should always be fuzzy. And I think what you guys have sort of done is maintain that authenticity of practice. That's sort of like academies here, right? So, but I can see that very clearly. And I sincerely wish Young Zhao would have been here, because he would have blown his brain, because this is what he is so passionate about. If you look him up, he is always about like, this is the age where kids should be driving their own learning. And he is like completely passionate about it. So we will flag it for him that this is an episode he absolutely has to watch and listen to. And I'm sure he'll be in touch. But I have a question, which is, and I'd love to get all of your quick thoughts on it. I know we are a little short on time, so quick, but it's a big question, which is, one of the things with public schools is that they cater to everybody because they are funded by taxpayer money. You have to, their doors are open to everybody. That comes with its own inherent challenges. A lot of the sort of concerns that you guys, talk about, and justifiably so, about school being disconnected, of projects being, or assignments being sort of predetermined by adults as opposed to being driven by your innate curiosities, come from that. So do you think, and briefly, I mean, and this is, again, I think we can talk about this forever, that these models that you guys are promoting, that you have built and developed, would work for every learner, or that once you scale and you start being open to all kinds of different, that maybe some kind of school-like structure will sort of emerge? I'm just curious to get at what you guys think of that. And we can go in any sequence, and we'll just keep it quick because I know we're short of time.
I can go.
Yes,
Great.
go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Aila.
Aila.
Well, see, WeQuil School is not, the reason why it can suit everyone is because it is not the same for everyone. It takes a lot of intuition and a lot of experience and understanding to work with these kids for 4 weeks and have them pop out self-directed, passionate, and motivated. And that takes a lot. And in terms of accessibility for parents, we support low, moderate, and high income because this is not a forever, like, we're not helping these kids. So
like, these kids start businesses on WeQuil app, and then they're making money for our platform. So this is not
and we're also not like herding sheep. Like, for 4 weeks we're working very directly with them, and that's still only 1 hour a day for 4 weeks. But those 4 weeks, even though we charge for those 4 weeks, we don't keep charging that amount. We charge a little bit for the membership, but we don't keep charging that amount because they're self-directed. It's not a daycare system. And I don't think it can be fit into a school one-size-fits-all structure, because it is completely different in terms of philosophy and structure and the where it's all coming from. And then there are these students where once they're passionate, then they become mentors and they keep growing and growing. And you can't fit it into a teacher and student structure, because it's completely different from that. And you've got Allyson, who is a student and then quickly popped up to be a mentor. You've got kids who are starting businesses, and then all of the learning pod teachers are like taking one of their chess classes or something like that, because everyone's helping each other. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you. Justin, you were saying something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if I work with a lot of micro school and alternative educational organizations in my role, and so one thing that seems to be a theme, amongst a lot of these programs, is that they kind of find this moderate place in between a more structured, rigid structure and a more self-directed program. So one thing that is emerging with a lot of them is they're spending a couple hours in the morning or something like that on a more either app-based personalized educational program that's focusing on some of the core subjects, math, English, reading, science, social studies, those kind of things. Or maybe it's even a direct instruction model or something like that, where the teacher's instructing. And then there's a more self-directed learning in the afternoon, and they bring in a lot more of these aspects and these project-based learning. So I think and there's lots of different things all along the spectrum of incredibly structured to completely unstructured. But a lot of them are kind of finding this moderate place where the WeQuil school model of self-directed education plays a very important part. And it's tough to say what percentage of the total time they spend on doing that, but I think it's absolutely necessary, and maybe not sufficient for everybody, but absolutely necessary for everybody.
Yeah, well, to add on to that, I think that's part of what we're really trying to do through WeQuil app and having this global school marketplace is empowering families to find the best solutions for their kids, for their needs. Education should be personalized, and the best way to do that is to have all these solutions in a way where families can find what will work for them. And so it's not like if a family is doing WeQuil School that they're not doing any other programs. It's about finding the combination of solutions, programs, communities, resources that can help you with whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, but really what we're doing at WeQuil School is we're empowering and motivating kids to learn, because once they do that, I mean, I'm sure you guys take like classes or like read a book every now and then, and read an article or things like that to learn something new all the time. But what's motivating you to do that? You want to learn, right? You want to create something. You have some kind of goal. It's the same with these students. Once they're motivated, that by no means means that they can't take any other course or something like that. It's just that they're motivated to learn. They know why. They're in the same mindset as the parent of, I want to become sufficient and I want to be ready for the real world. But Allyson, go ahead. I talk too much.
Just
You're
real
good.
quick, Allyson, we only have a few seconds left.
Basically, so I think of WeQuil as a co-op, if you would say, because I'm homeschooled, but fitting a co-op into my time, especially with WeQuil, was hard. But I've definitely learned working with kids, especially younger ones, that trying to get them to focus was hard. And so I don't know if you guys have already talked about this, but the weekly process, I mean, I don't know, we don't have time, but we on Mondays we set goals, and on Fridays we reflect on them, talk about them. And I've noticed with younger kids especially, goals have helped them to make more projects, and I could go on and on, but yeah.
It sounds like we have to have another show with you all, and whether it's an anniversary show like we're having next week, or maybe a follow-up in 1 year from today or something like that. I will say to our listeners, as well as our guests here today, a big thank you, and that we had a show similar in some ways on Afghanistan a month ago. It's episode 195, using 21st century online learning to teach girls in Afghanistan, where their peers in California were grading their work. So the peer mentoring kind of thing that you're working on, Allyson, is evident in that episode. If people are looking to learn more, I recommend that you go there. Again, I thank you. I know Lydia and Punya want to follow up, and Punya is going to introduce the next show after Lydia makes a wrap-up comment. So Lydia, you want to take over?
Yes, thank you so much for such an enriching show. I've definitely learned so much, even though I already know you before. And I think you guys really showed the world what young people are capable of, and you guys have already accomplished so much. And I am just a huge congratulations to all of you, and please keep up this great work. And we love to host you again and hear about your journey and the progress you've made, because I think this is truly a special episode, and you guys are such a special team. And then I'm going to pass
Thank
on
you
to
so much.
I'm going to pass on to Punya to introduce the next episode.
Thank you. So I have an essay that I wrote called My Greatest Failure, and that ended up becoming a TED Talk. So if you want to go to my website and look it up, and it talks about my 4 years that I went to. I grew up in India, and if you're good in science and math in India, you end up going to engineering school or medical school, right? So I went to engineering. And I talked about those 4 years as being the worst 4 years of my life. I think I became a better educator because of that, because I was a very enthusiastic, high energy student. I was writing, and Aila, you will appreciate this, and I think Allyson, you will as well, talking of interdisciplinary. I was writing limericks about special theory of relativity, sitting in my, advanced physics class. But that system didn't care for me. I hated it. ended up going into design and education. All of that stuff sort of emerges out of that. And I wish I had something like this when I was growing up. This is way before the internet and all of that technology. So all I have to say is thank you so much, both for what you do and the time that you've spent today with us. One thing that was really amazing to me, I just have to mention, is when I hear Sumay, you and Aila talk, and Allyson as well. You said that you have no training in education, you don't have a master's degree, undergraduate degree in education, but all of the things that you say are so on point with what we have learned over the years through the research that people have done around what good education looks like, what authentic sort of motivational systems can be. So I think in your own way, you've sort of found yourself at that sort of cutting edge of what we know about how people learn. So that's awesome as well. And can't wish you guys enough for whatever you guys do in the future. It's going to be amazing. With that, to introduce our next episode, that is our 200th episode. So really excited to celebrate that. If I've said this before, that if you'd have told me in March 2020 that I'd be doing this for 4.5 years, I would have refused to participate because that was such an investment. It would have seemed like such an investment of time, but it really hasn't. It has been an absolute pleasure and joy to, this episode is a great example of the value that it has given to me personally. So we will have two amazing educators with us, both emeritus faculty who have been hugely inspirational to me personally. One is David Berliner. If you haven't read his work, please go and look him up. He has I wanted to come to ASU when I graduated with my PhD because he was the dean here, except they didn't invite me for an interview. So I had to wait 20 years to get here. But David Berliner will be joining us, as well as Tom Reeves, who's, again, both of these are impeccable researchers, scholars, but more importantly, wonderful human beings. And I can't think of a better way of celebrating 200 episodes by going to two of the most foremost thinkers in this space in education. And we are really looking forward to that. So that will be at 11 a.m., so 1 hour early, next Saturday.
Eastern time.
Eastern time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And with that, again, thank you guys so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend. Keep in touch.